Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wargame Red Dragon. I have a replay review for you guys today. It is a community cast, a ranked game between Split and Polska Gora, and the replay review was requested by Polska Gora, so I'll be watching his perspective. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer, I have watched this replay, I've looked at Polska Gora's deck as well, and I'll have deck recommendations after the actual gameplay. So this will be a little bit, not the same thing as usual. I'm not going to just play it all the way through and give commentary sort of blow by blow. Instead, I'm going to take a look, make recommendations, play it, pause it, things like that. And because you did ask, Polska, no, this is not 1 in the morning for me. This is now 2:15 because I looked through, I gave it some thought, and, well, I hope you enjoy the video. I hope it's helpful. Ranked is hard. Another little disclaimer, everything I'm going to tell you is entirely based off of my style of play, and this is my least favorite map to play on for ranked, so take that for what it is. I struggle with this map often as well, but hopefully I can give you some of the good advice that I have received that has made this a little bit easier. So first thing, the opener. Going all in on this side is definitely a thing that you can do, and the Vanguard, well, the light deployment in India is perfectly fine. You have infantry here, you have recon, ATGM, it's the bare minimum. This can come back to bite you if your opponent's doing a 2-point push, and so the first thing I want to point out is this Gazelle Canon should already be here. On this map in particular, I think spotting what your opponent is doing early is key. And if you look, this is sort of what Split's doing. So he has a longbow and a dap. It's aggressive, but it's USA. I mean, this is sort of what happens here. And the longbow can see really far out, so he already knows that you're not going into Delta with something quick moto, and yeah, he might not be able to see over here quite as well, but I really think it's worth having that recon helo already. And yeah, it might get hunted down by a DAP, but then at least you know there's a longbow. You know it's USA, you get a lot of information off the jump. The other thing I would say is, if you are going to go up here, I highly recommend that you have fast-wheeled stuff moving up to this section of town right here, and that you have the Crotal go with it, because your Crotal is going to take a left, and the main zoning areas, particularly in the early game on this map, is usually in or around Delta. Sometimes a little over here on Delta, but I mean, you have stuff there now for this. This is fine. You can see with the Gazelle Canon. What you don't have is something that can handle this longbow, and if your Crotal's right here, and you have good micro, that is a dead longbow. It's overextended a little bit, arguably. Well, it hasn't because you don't have anything to punish it with, but you know, keeping that alive would be really good. You have Legion 90 here early. It's a nice unload, but it would be 150 point pickup to kill that longbow right there. So I think, and you're bringing it over, but now this is awkward, right? Because it can't move as fast on the ground as the longbow can move in the air, as the DAP can move in the air, and players are going to know, okay, well, anywhere that longbow shows up, my opponent is going to move his AA to try and zone that area. So he's already pulling it back and moving it across, and really, I do want to stress again, you can't see anything right now of his. He can see that you're moving over here. He's been able to see that a little bit when his longbow was farther forward on this side as well. And that recon, that knowledge, is what allows him to make an early CV buy. So that I think was a really powerful thing. And I know you're on edge because of the longbow over on this side, but not using the wheeled speed to get into here and into here is, I think, a little bit overcautious, perhaps. Like, I don't know, you can make arguments either way, but the thing that made me think that, really, is by the time your Fallschirmjäger get into this section of woods, all of your mechanized stuff has caught up, which is not really great. And then, again, because of the awkward Crotal not catching the longbow over here, now the longbow is blocking on that side, your Crotal was zoned out because it's sort of a lot of ground to cover with just this. So I certainly understand it's a tough thing, it's a tough opener to go for. The DAP pickup is very nice, and you do have a lot of potential with how this is going, by the way. Definitely keep them going on the ground. If you do see a longbow like this, a nice buy relatively early can be smoke, because you're going to need it one way or another, especially if you are planning on using mechanized units as well. Yeah, I think that could be quite nice. And now, when you have a CV in Charlie, you're buying a Patu Tiger. Like, this is all fine with the Patu Tiger. I think it really just is smoothing out this opener a little bit would go a long way. And your strategy, by the way, with getting into the 2-point alpha, yeah, this is a good strategy, because the basic idea is you make alpha enough of a pain that you win the game while he's trying to push you out of alpha. And we'll return to that later, because I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity here. I'll say exactly why later on. And another thing too, this is Eurocore, and there are no Recon AMXs in the opener. And yeah, they're a little bit awkward of a unit, but having the quick wheeled Recon with a gun is really great, and brings a lot to the table, I think. If you could redo this push into Charlie with just one of these two Fallschirm, right? Because they're pretty expensive. They're 35 points apiece, plus the TPZ Fuchs, which is, of course, the cheaper option of running it. It's not the Fuchs Milan. That's still 90 points right there. You bring one of these two, not both, and you can almost fit a Krotal and a Recon AMX into that. And now you have a gun, you have anti-air, you still have the Fallschirmjäger, and quite frankly, I'd be bringing them into this section, because when you get in here, your goal is largely to get this town, and to get zoning sort of into this section of woods you can see right here. The reason that you want this town is something that I don't think you actually tried to do later on, but we'll talk about it when it becomes more of a thing. In Discord, when you're talking about this, you said that he bullied you with MBT 70s. My conclusion is actually a little bit different. I think there were other sort of issues that led to the MBT 70s basically fulfilling the role that they were free to then do. Another couple of comments. We're 5 minutes in. This is not unloaded. This is not unloaded. There could be infantry moving up here. You'd never see it because this recon's not online, and your zoning options aren't online. So this could be pushed relatively easily right now because your units are still sitting there in their boxes, which is not great. Nice pullback on the Leopard too, seeing that it's spotted, and the Tiger zoning here is a little bit awkward, right? Like, I'm not entirely sure what this was meant to kill. If it's the longbow, that's going to be a really rare thing, where your Tiger is going to have more range than the Krotal and more ability than the Krotal to deal with it. It might have been a, hey, look at this is scary, let's keep away. But what we're feeling right now with this pushback from Split is it would have been really nice to have the 140 points on the ground. Not even necessarily wheeled. Mechanized stuff on the ground could be up here pretty soon, if not already, and I think that would have added a lot of punch. Another thing too, if you're going against USA and you see this early, this is a D Eagle. Now is the time to buy either heavy anti-plane anti-air or an ASF, and I think this is a little bit where your deck might not be setting you up the best to succeed. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And with your deck, how it's built, I understand why you didn't go for an ASF, but I think this is a problem because Eurocore frankly gets some amazing ASF options, really amazing ASF options, and bringing one of those in means that those bombers can't come in for free. Maybe the USA player brings in his own ASF, you have a duel, you have to duke that out, and you need stuff on the ground as well. But if you look at it, like this Gepard A1, what is this Gepard A1 supposed to do that your current Krotals cannot? Because 26-25 meter versus planes is the same as on the Krotal. Granted, it's a gun, it'll get chipped, but it's radar, so it requires effort. And 2800 meter range is shorter against helicopters than the Krotals. If you're going to go for something that doesn't have great anti-plane range, just resupply the Krotals, which is cheaper than the Gepard A1 anyway. And if you're going to get something that needs to kill planes, either ASF or double Roland 3. And that double Roland 3 can be really powerful against planes, particularly low ECM planes like the Nighthawk, which we haven't seen yet, but we will eventually, as you know. And the other thing I mentioned too is when you're in this part, yeah, here's another helicopter buy, right? You have 240 points that hasn't been on the ground, and yeah, the Tiger got some kills, but I would argue that Panzergren 90 and Martyr 2, well, that would have gotten the same infantry kills, would have gotten the same IFV kills over here, and it would be sticking around, which is really important for this. Really very, very crucial for this sort of thing. And the Tiger could be a lot of men on the ground that aren't there right now, and when you get in here, you want to get infantry in this section of town, and if you can get an ATGM, where's the spot? So you can go here, and if you can get something here like a tank right here, that gets locked down pretty thoroughly, which is what you're looking for. So I think that would be really nice to have done as well. And it can be a little bit weird thinking about bringing in tanks to a zone like this, because there's heavy, dense forest, there's lots of town blocks and things like that. It's a little bit goofy. But, yeah, if you do, right, so your objective is to push into here. There's Rifleman 90 should be something that, as Eurocorps, you're happy to see, because Eurocorps doesn't have the best deep forest grinding ability of any spec, but Rifleman 90 aren't great at this either. They're 15 points for regular training and an only okay armament, so you're meeting inefficiency with inefficiency. This is good for you, potentially, if you can capitalize on it. And the way to capitalize is to fight between these town blocks, yeah, exactly, and the Legion 90 will shred things like light riflemen or tons of Rifleman 90 without too much trouble. So in terms of buys, I think that's something that could have gone differently, is getting more functional units up here pretty quickly. And keep in mind too, your opponent right now is giving you a bit of a gift, which might not feel like it, but there's a lot of stuff here that's doing nothing. These Pivads doing nothing, Rifleman 90 doing nothing, not even really being microed, and the mortars doing nothing as well. He could be pushing into Delta, well, further into Delta, and he's not. But this is where the thing that I said earlier, you're trying to win the game while you're holding on to Alpha, and you haven't capped India. And I think part of the pressure for this is making sure you have enough here, but I think this is sort of, it's a necessary buy. We're 9 minutes in, that's 900 points. There should be room here to do a CV, and actually we're about to see where it is. Mirage 5F, 100 points, that's pretty much nearly a CV. And when this is called out, there's really not much visibility on anything. Blind bombers in ranked are ways to lose games, especially blind bombers that never make their target. So yeah, it does show you the double pivads, but here's your CV buy. And if you're in India and he can't cap in his 2 points or here in Alpha, then you're getting 30 points a minute. And it does risk forcing him to buy a CV for Delta, but then that's fewer points on the ground and you have an easier time holding on to Alpha. So there's really very few drawbacks to this, I think, with good presence. And if you're worried about not having that good presence, that's where the different buys comes in. Particularly, I think, with the Martyr VTS1, I don't see very many people take this. I think it's a little bit awkward. I'm going to sort of recommend some things in the deck building section of this after the replay later on that will replace this and maybe do that job a little bit more neatly, a little bit more cost effectively. And I see what you're going for. Heimat shoots in with good punch behind it. It's solid reasoning, but I think it might be more solid if done a little bit differently, shall we say. And granted, I'm no Eurocorps expert, but I have recently played the deck and gotten in a couple wins against Lieutenant Colonels and Colonels, and one relatively unfortunate Brigadier General. But you know, it's not my favorite deck for a reason, and that reason is that the infantry grind is not very cost effective, which is something I definitely like to have. But yeah, I don't know. The Martyr VTS1 I think is a bit awkward, and again, this is another 100-point clump, right? So if you're looking for a CV, this is another case where it could be it. And ASF, circling back here, that Nighthawk can't get out as it is. It gets out pretty much for free, kills some Legion 90. It's denying you the ability to really lock this down, which has been, I think, the main source of your issue. If you have the town here locked down, if you can get this, get a tank in, the game is yours. Even like this, even fighting this sort of long-running battle here, if you're ticking, the game is yours. And that, I think, I mean, if you were right now 28 minutes, 43 seconds left on the clock, if you were up 200 points to 0, you might even get a surrender. Honestly, I've gotten that from people before because they look at this and they think to themselves, okay, I have to build up to push this. And if we look, he's doing that right now. So M3A2, Pivaz, more light riflemen, there's boxes coming out here. There's really, I mean, there's not all that much stuff here, especially compared to what you have. Let's look at neutral. You have the Martyrs, you have Heimat shoots, and you have all this. If you were up and ticking +2, that could just be a surrender. Instead, it's not. And in part, that's because 0 to 51 is a lot more approachable to come back from. Now, another issue, you'll notice what your opponent has and you don't. Recon. So if you're going to use units like the Martyr VTS1, shooting from here to here, they kill this Bradley very easily. Bradley is not going to be able to kill more than one with the TOW 2. Bushmaster's not really going to get a lot of kills here, but you don't have recon to give you that sort of spotting. So where would you put it? recon infantry can walk right up here, turn off their gun, and walk pretty much right into this little point. And if they don't have their gun on, they're going to be counter-spotting vehicles, I think, at this range into here. Maybe not the Bradley, but it depends on the size. Yeah, maybe not the Bradley. I'd have to look at the exact range. But it certainly is a start. And the other thing, too, is if you have recon here and you peek these martyrs forward, if the M3A2 fires that TOW2, now it is spotted. And now it's going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's a nice way to hold on here, where you do have the advantage, if only for now. Another thing that's going to deny you that advantage, though, is not being able to punish the bombers, because this is catastrophic. This is absolutely catastrophic. Yeah. And this, I think, is really where the beginnings of the issues that you're going to have start popping up. Because, I mean, yeah, like, trading these 1-for-1 with an MBT-70 is quite nice. You should have actually taken that engagement, killed the second one if you could. 120 points at the cost of 25 to 50. That's a nice trade. And I think it really just, yeah, not to repeat myself too much here, but lack of an ability to lock down Alpha completely is part of what loses you the game. And the main things are recon, dealing with your opponent's planes, and some more cost-effective buys. And that, I think, would make a really big difference. Yeah? Okay, so let's look over here. Another thing that you can do to shake things up, and actually let's pause back at the neutral, is you can try to put a little bit of forward pressure over here. Now, I'm not talking about big investments, because this is where you should be investing into Alpha to lock this down, especially with the back and forth fight here. But the Commandos Para, what can they spot from this position? Because there's dense forest this way, there's dense forest this way between them and where the blue 4 player might be sneaking up. If you want to, you can go up to some place like here, where at least you're going to be spotting really well against anything in the open, or you can come up this way and just take, you know, a couple of fire support units, not really anything that expensive, and those recon infantry, and all we're trying to do is make blue panic a little bit. So you get him having some troops under fire on the other side of the map, and he's going to be looking over here. He's going to think to himself, oh, look at this. I have a TACOM, light riflemen, and rangers. If I'm about to get pushed here, I need to buy. I need to defend this. And all of a sudden, the reinforcements coming in here, which is a quad stack of infantry and the other riflemen here, they're not there. Because there's been points buys in Foxtrot. That buys you time. It buys you breathing room. Get yourself some breathing room with minimal investment. And part of the way to do that is to make your opponent think, oh crap, I have to look somewhere else. Another thing too, Seiza buy. Not the worst buy necessarily if you know where your opponent is, which you sort of do, sort of don't. But again, India's uncapped. 26 minutes left on the clock, so that's nearly 24 minutes in. No cap on India for free. And that +2 now has cost you, realistically, 300 points? Yeah, so 350 to 0 is roughly where you could be. That's instead of the first plane buy or instead of other buys like that. And so here is actually a really nice case. You're rolling 3, it gets very, very lucky. This is a nice pickup, it's a nice kill, but it's not something that you can usually rely on. So between that and the Gepard A1, that is a nice kill. But I think it needed to be there earlier in the form of either an ASF or earlier rolling 3s. In particular, the Gepard A1 I think was a bad buy. And then the other thing that I said we'd return to is what you do with this section of town. And it's actually really goofy. If you get Fallschirm Jaeger 90 in here and you bring up a couple more, by the way, Rifleman 90 killing the Martyrs is part of why I said I think they're a bit awkward. Let's look at Split. He has Rifleman 90 that he just walked up in here. If your falls get into the woods, M3A2 Bradley is dead. Everything back here he has to respond to. He has to pull his own infantry back, which buys you breathing room in Delta, and or he has to buy more to then keep this section of woods. And if you're making him fight over this, then he's not bringing in reinforcements here, and everything that we're doing right now is trying to relieve pressure to allow you to consolidate every single thing, because this zone, if consolidated properly, is damned hard to break back into in a 1v1. It really is. And that little bit of a, okay, well, you've locked this down, get some free kills, is very nice. The other thing that will prevent your opponent from doing is capping Delta, which again buys you more time at a +2, So we're taking +2 over here, we're denying the enemy cap in Delta, or at least making him buy over here. We're making him buy over in Foxtrot because he has to deal with, getting his units somewhat shot at. And all of a sudden, this goes from a losing fight to maybe a stalemate. And a stalemate where you're taking +2 is a good stalemate to have. Or it even becomes a case where he doesn't have enough points to really mount any sort of offense, and there you go. That becomes a win, right? That becomes a surrender. That becomes some elo for you instead of for split, which is really what we're looking for here. By the way, I hope I'm not being too harsh with this. It's never my intention. I look at my own replays the same way, and well, I often ask people to look at mine as well and just be brutal, because I think it really can help quite a bit to have people sometimes say to you, hey, this is what went wrong, and it might not be what you think. And again, there was another MBT-70 kill. Like, these MBT-70s were a lot of places. They're not what's doing the damage. The fact that you can't keep infantry alive because of the D-Eagle and the Nighthawk, that's what's doing damage. The fact that some of your buys are not very cost effective, that's what's doing damage. The fact that the first Mirage 5F died and the second one, I mean, neither one of those made it to target, both because of double pivads in this section of woods. And the simple solution to the second one, other than not buying the plane, is call it in over here and give it a shift queue. You control this airspace through from Golf to Charlie, up and into contested airspace in Alpha. So why fly it over the same spot where it got shot down the first time? That's 200 points in planes that didn't need to die, and now you're in trouble because Alpha's been capped for blue, and you have to do a responsive cap in India, so you're giving him a little bit of breathing room here, because +2 is 30 points a minute. It's a 2-minute wheeled reinforcement round into India, I'm pretty sure. So this is a lot of time, it's a lot of tick, it's letting your opponent back into a game where you had this locked down pretty early. At least enough to have gotten the win eventually, I think. So yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. Let's go a little bit faster now as this game progresses. And this is a tough position to be in, because sort of at this point, the right buy, I'm not really sure it exists here. You're going to get pushed back. The key things that you have to do now are make sure that you hold this section of woods if you can. And, oh, geez. Nice Raven kill. A little bit lucky off a double Kratal, but, yeah, luck is good. Yeah, so now you really want to hold here, and you want to zone him out and be able to threaten attacks into this section of woods. And the way that you do that is you get some recon up in this section if you can, recon infantry up here if you can, ATGM somewhere up here if you can, and that just denies this section of road to your opponent. And you never let him be comfortable in this section of woods, because if you turn it around from his perspective, he's going to be pushing you in your 2 on this side if everything's gone well in Alpha. It's the risk with fighting in Alpha so much is if your opponent is buying everything into here, well, where is he going to develop his push? Right into Charlie. So at least that's what will usually be the case. Another thing too, Jeep CVs, please don't run these. I think especially the 110 point ones, yeah, they're fast, but they're still 5 strength, and they're, for all intents and purposes, everything about why the 100.1 is bad is still true. Except now you're paying 10 extra points for it. Another thing, Leopard 2, Martyr 2, great fire support. Not when they're sent in blind, which I think you just saw there. And we've all been in this part of the game as well, where we're sitting there going, dagnabbit, I thought I had this, and now I don't, and I don't quite know what to do, so I'm going to hope that my opponent is negligent somewhere. But that hope is even more powerful when done properly, and you already had infantry on the way. There's no reason to send in the Leopard 2 this far into Delta. Another thing too, I think the second Cesar buy here is a little bit of an issue, even though it does get kills later on, if we look at why. So, there's Rangers here, there's some Riflemen 90, but again, I think that 120 points would serve you much better on the ground. 120 points is a double stack of Panthergren 90 and Martyr 2 and 10 points to spare, which could go into fire support if that Leopard 2 was alive right now, so the Martyr 2 needs to be pushing up this way a little bit, Leopard 2 pushing up this way a little bit, because Heimat Schutzen cannot fight even against Riflemen here, they're going to die. Which is unfortunate, but it is true. And so you need infantry to provide that push. This many Heimat shoots in, 120 points of Heimat shoots in, is, I think, a little bit of a waste. It didn't need to be, because you have the Leopard 2, you have the Martyr 2, but here, as it is, yeah, I think that's a little bit of a waste. And the nice kills in the helicopters still could have been there if you were engaging with the Leopard 2, if you're engaging with that fire support, if you have shocks here making progress. You still have the Kurtal come up and get those kills, the Martyr 2 zoning out that later helicopter is quite funny. But, I mean, for all the Heimat shoots in that are here, this Rifleman 90 has been alive for way too long. Way too long. Even, I mean, quite frankly, I think the Heimat shoots in have a really funnily okay launcher for militia. But, yeah, you just need punch, you need to get through, and yeah, I mean, if we look at what this double Cesar does right here, it'll get a couple of kills on Rifleman, but it's not nearly as effective as something like that, how that Nighthawk has been doing, and it's not as effective as having fire support up and with your push. Yeah, a bit of a throw there from your opponent with the pivots, but such things happen. Another thing too is keep in mind we haven't really seen much smoke micro this whole game, maybe a little bit, but not a ton, and that your Kurtal died because these Rangers were spotting it and because it had just killed helicopters. So you pull things back, you reapply your smoke here to block off his Rangers, to block off anything that's trying to provide fire support from this side, and you have a little bit more success coming in to this engagement, I think. And this is gonna get tough, right? How do you deal with a Command Abrams in this deck? I really don't know, because the Cesars won't reliably kill this. You need to be through the woods, and all that's left in your way right now are Rangers. This is, oh man, this is so close to a win. It really is so close to a win. Which will probably be more annoying than helpful, but you know, I do mean it, right? And that's a silver lining as well, because it means a couple of small changes and it becomes a win. Yeah, that's unfortunate. It really is. Imagine the difference if you had Panzergrenadier 90 that were still alive instead of these Heimat shoots in here. And you get into the town, you kill the Rangers, this town is yours now, these reinforcements get shot on the way in, and that Command Abrams can't sit there safe. This Nighthawk, if it was already dead, is going to be a lot less of a problem. And so you do have the 2000 CRDI, but this, a lot of people do take it, but the people that I know that take it in addition to either the KWS or more commonly the Rafale, because on its own it's a little bit subpar. Like, how does the CRDI deal with the Sea Eagle? It's 170 points, 4 7,700 meter range AMRAM, 60% accuracy, 5 HE, and your semi-actives are shorter range. So this is not a fight that the RDI can really win head on, but it's a fight that you have to take. Oh, damn, did he really? It's a fight you should have had to have taken head on. Oh my goodness, that's bad Sea Eagle micro. A little bit not great RDI micro as well. If you'd right-click there, you may well have gotten the kill. Oh, don't tell me. I forgot about that. Oh my goodness. I didn't notice that on the first time through, I forgot. Oh jeez. Yeah, the RDI should never get that kill, pretty much, but, I mean, okay, you know. Wargame giveth, Wargame taketh away. Another thing too, I think this is a lot different if you have something in the town. Rifleman 90 and boxes are certainly very annoying, especially with the 3 front armor, but Panzergrenadier 90 kill that no problem. So you're still going to be one-shotting these boxes and killing some of the infantry inside. And if we look, this very nearly happens, except these need to be unloaded now, right now, because the Rifleman 90 can do a lot to these things, and this is just a micro-lapse, really. It's all it is. The unfortunate bit, so you see the Panzergrenadier 90 pop out damaged and mostly dead, and panicked, stunned, not combat effective. If you unload them here, you get them moving forward with tertiaries off. With the tertiaries off, they're killing the M113A3s. Martyr 2s behind them, then womp up the other M113A3s, and can damage a lot of these riflemen that your Panzergrenadier 90 are taking shots from, because at this sort of thing, and we can see it right now, there's no tertiary micro from your opponent. Well, not that it was necessarily required there either, because everything's already dead, but I'd be willing to bet that The Martyr 2s would have stayed alive for quite a while, providing excellent fire support if the Panzergren were just alive ahead of them, and your 10-second aim time double Cesar, I mean, yeah. If everything from blue was still attacking forward trying to clear you out, this becomes absolutely devastating instead of mildly annoying but not game winning. Right? You can kill all the riflemen that you want to in here right now, it's not going to win you the game, which is frustrating, but it sort of goes to, it's nice to have a double Cesar up, but without proper board presence it's not going to be make or break. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is here. So I think that's most of it. I hope we covered a lot of helpful stuff for you, and once again, I'm doing my best with this, but as I'm usually between Brig and Colonel, I'm very much not the best player to be doing this on his own. Usually, and if you like, I can ask other people to give their 2 cents as well for a replay review, but I think we saw a lot of things that would be helpful. Just to briefly summarize, when you're fighting in Alpha, get the cap in India, get those tick, because even with 9 minutes left, if you were up 374 to 128, which could be even higher, right? I mean, 10 minutes at +2 could have been even more than that. He is going to be hard-pressed to win this. 8 minutes left, a +1 is not good enough, and a +1 is something you could reasonably limit him to. So that right there could have won you the game, even with the rest of this going on. If you can't do that, as it was in that fight, you begin to stress your opponent's micro. You stress your opponent's micro by skirmishing with very cheap units here to make him think you're going to push into Foxtrot to make him have to protect there. You also tax things like his planes by getting an ASF up earlier and anti-plane AA up earlier against somebody who is going to be doing this to you, because I mean, the Nighthawk came in so many times, got so many kills, killed your CV in Alpha. If it was dead earlier, you never could have gotten that kill. All of a sudden, you have a lot more of +0 for your opponent, and that really would double down on the early tick that very much was a possibility in India. Both of the plane buys were not worthwhile. One, because they never actually made it its target. The first one, okay, sure. The second one, taking the same route, not really something that you can afford to do in ranked. So then, if you really did want to buy that plane, bring it around, bring it through, and you have much higher odds of surviving when you're flying mostly in your own airspace until you actually reach your target. And with that, I think that next time I very much hope it's a win. I think it's well within your capabilities with a little bit better buys, a little bit better prioritization here. So let's go over now. I mean, even with all of this, right, 25-15 to 23-10, you weren't out-traded all that much, and 100 of this was throwing away a Tiger at the end because of frustration. So it really was a close game. Let's take a look now at the deck here, which if we look, oh yeah, I have not modified this yet, and I think a lot of it honestly is quite nice, but there are a couple of changes that I'm going to recommend. Now the first one you may see coming already, but Heimat shoots in versus reservists, there's really not that much reason to take the Heimat shoots in, and you might look at this and say, okay, well, the launcher is better, and yeah, the launcher is better, the Blindicide is just better than the LRAC 73. But the box is much worse. So if we pin these two and look, AMX-13 BTT is 3 frontal armor. This is one-shotted by 17 HE, 17 AP heat, not HE, AP heat. The M113A1G, 1 armor. All it takes is 10. The difference here is that even reservists can one-shot the M13A1G. More to the point, so can base Rifleman. Rifleman 90 can one-shot either one, but it's not always going to be Rifleman 90. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in these guys. I'm not going to reorganize this just because it's a pain in the ass to do it even for my own deck, but yeah. Another thing that I would really say is if you're going to have one ATGM and limited anti-tank options in other tabs, I think if you're going to take the F3, down vet it, and here's why. The F2 has 5% less accuracy, but you do get better availability at 8.6. Down vet F3, up vet F2 have very similar accuracy, and you're getting 6 either way. So if you're going to get 6 either way and you want the additional punch, that's fine. But down vet them, use them a bit more liberally here, and then it's not it's a unit you can use more because you're not going to be out of it functionally if you make 1 or 2 mistakes. Legion 90, it is more common to take the VAB T2013 here, and I'm going to recommend it for you. And the reason why is because this makes your wheeled openers that much more potent. You run into coalitions that don't have a wheeled autocannon, like Scandinavia or similar, and all of a sudden your VAB T2013 is really taking a toll on them, so it's a lot more punch. It is 5 points more expensive. I think it's 100% worthwhile. The intended use of taking these in the VABs seems like you're trying to grind with them, and 25 point shocks with AT weapons that are bad in woods is not necessarily the intended role, so we'll handle that in another place. I'd also downbet the Fallschirmjäger 90, but that's just me. So we move on now to support, and I think this is entirely fine. Tank tab, we have some issues here, I think. So the 30B2, you never called it out, and really I think that's because as it stands, these two are actually competing for the same role, which is a little bit weird. Your 30B2 is more expensive by 15 points, it has more armor, which is nice, it has better optics, which is nice, but the gun's actually worse in everything but rate of fire, which is really goofy. Whenever you have 2 units where you never call one out, think about whether or not you actually need both. And as it is, you're calling out the VTS-1 instead of ever calling out this tank. Now, my goal is to get you away from both of these units, but that's sort of beside the point. And the Leopard 2, I think, is a little bit underwhelming compared to the 2A1. And yeah, I share a disdain for the 2A1. This is a well-known thing I complain about relatively often, but from having tested it in an unspec deck, it is just better, to be honest. I mean, 20 points, you get 2 AP power, you get a little bit better accuracy and stabilizer, you get 1 additional point of frontal armor, and it is much more resilient. It's I think it'll change things from needing 2 hits to kill to needing 3, which often buys you time in the woods. So we're going to drop both these tanks, and we're going to put in, well, you have 4 super heavies. I think we're going to put in, well, let's just keep it safe. Downbet 2A1, and the goal of this tab is not to be your fire support. The goal of this tab is to kill tanks and to punish your opponent for not having tanks that can deal with it. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to outfit this Leclerc, and the reason why, actually let's fix how this looks because now I can't really stand that, hold on. The reason why we're outfitting the Leclerc is because we're trying to capitalize on the high fire rate for more crits off of the higher veterancy as well, and more accuracy from this. We want the Leclerc to be hitting as often as it can, and dealing as much damage and crits as possible, so we're going to opt that. Besides, this is 340 points for the 2A5, it would be 360 for the Leclerc. Do you really think you're going to call in that many super heavies? And I would hope the answer is no, but if it's not, then I think it can really be indicative of needing to bring more moderate fire support like the 2A1, or even the Martyr 2s, which the Martyr 2s are your main go-to fire support here in Eurocore. It's just, they're that good, and you have them, and that's great, but they need to stay alive, and they need to fire, they need to be there to augment things like a 2A1, and to augment things like some of your fighting recon, which, speaking of, you do have the wheeled 10RC here. That's great. Use it in your opener, please. It will help you, it'll help you quite a lot. You can do double recon helo if you're not comfortable taking the Patu Tiger in the opener. I certainly agree with this. I'd like to find a way to fit in the 1390. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that just yet, but we're also going to drop this, get 2 activation points back there, and let's take a look. That is actually enough to bring another card of recon, which we very well can do. But first, let's take a look here, because this is actually something that will lose you the game outright, which is very much not our goal. Only Jeep CVs, and even only 6 of them, it's 2 problems compounded on 1. For one, you always want 7 CVs or more, and yeah, it's kind of arbitrary, 7 or 6. 6 is not the worst thing ever, but it can definitely hurt, especially on maps like Nuclear Winter, also things like Hell in a Very Small Place where there's common CV kills. 6 is just, it's just on the edge of too few. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to take the Fuchs. For 10 more points, we still get speed. So we still have, I mean, we have 105 km/h off-road, 150 km on-road. But now we have 1 frontal armor all around, we're resistant to small arms fire, and we have double the strength. This is much more resilient to dying. And we're going to take the Panther. Now, I personally run Eurocore with the Leopard 2, and you can run that instead of the Panther, and I think it's perfectly fine. Actually, this is what I'd recommend instead of that. We have 2 activation points. Now let's look at the plane tab, and we're going to just start by pitching all of this for right now and rebuilding. So the RDI has competition with the KWS and with the Rafale, and I'm going to recommend that you try the KWS because the Rafale can be really expensive and it's not a thing that you really want to trade. Neither is the KWS for that matter, but it is 40 points cheaper. And yeah, you don't get 2 at Elite, but you still do get 2 at Veteran, and its armament is a lot better. So 3 Fire and Forget AMRAAMs, it's very nice as opposed to just 2 semi-actives. It's not as much of a guaranteed kill. 3 is really, really repeatable, really consistent. You share the same ECM. You are a little bit slower, but it's not the end of the world there. And I think you'll get a lot of mileage out of this. And then if you're looking for a seed plane as well, for a seed plane, honestly, the Jaguar A is just fine. You take 2 down vet, but then we need to talk about bomber choices. Eurocore, I think, doesn't really have a great bomber. The IDS is a little weird. The Mirage 5F is a little weird. I recommend that you don't take one, especially because you demonstrated willingness to use 2 Césars quite effectively. These are your bombers now, and that'll work fine. It'll be much easier to keep alive than your actual bombers that didn't even really make it to target. So, and this is not to rub salt in the wound, it's just an observation. They didn't, which is rough, but you know, it happens sometimes. So we're going to do, instead, we're going to take double Peace Rhine for anti-tank stuff, which is a little bit cliche, but there it is. And optionally, you can take the Super Attentat here. I have run the Attentat IVM, but that's only in France where I've taken it, where I have the extra points. I don't really recommend it here. I recommend 2 Super Attentat, and now we have separation of roles. We have the Césars, whose job it is to provide you your sort of bomber support from afar, 7 HE, and low aim time. This can support infantry fights. This can also snipe units. Maybe not as good at that with 2 down vet as it is with 1 at Veteran, but you know, dealer's choice. And now we can come back in, and we need 1 more activation point, which is a little bit goofy. See, I don't mind your Helo tab here. The HAP is more common, but we need just 1 extra point to get the additional recon. Or you can cut the Canon, but I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the ERC 90 because I think it's a fine unit, but it does sort of get outclassed in the opener by just bringing a 10 RC, and you get recon, and you get a more impactful gun, although not perfect for this. And now we can take the 1390, and what the 1390 does is it provides the fire support that you were getting out of something like the VTS-1. Yeah, the AP power is very different, but it gives you recon as well for 25 points. So it's the same point cost here. These things, while they're firing their 12 round, well, quote-unquote clip, or volley, or whatever it is, they have 20 RPM. These guys will mulch infantry in the open, and they'll spot further units. So what you do is you bring those guys up, and you have them spot for your 2A1s, you have them spot for your Martyr 2s, and you get lots of good kills that way. And it can be really, really effective there. So, is this how I run Eurocore? Not quite. Are there other ways to run Eurocore? You betcha. But I think this will do you a lot better in the long run. Yeah, easier to make good buys, I think, and has a couple of separation of roles and more tools than were in your original. Plus just straight upgrades like the Reservist and the MX-13 compared to the high mat shoots, and they really are, they die a lot slower, which is, it's the whole role of Reservist, right? So, well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful for everyone who's out there who wants to see a replay review of their own. Just send it to me on my Discord. Link is on the channel description. And if you do like this sort of thing, please don't hesitate to leave a like, share, subscribe, all that YouTube nonsense that has me say like, well, geez, I just said like, God. That has me say the word like way more often than I would enjoy. There we go. And we'll have another video for you guys real soon. Thank you all for hanging around.